And this is a chap called Elie Mistal, who seems to hate white people, and wrote in The Nation, which is a publication that seems to hate white people, about how he is not ready to re-enter white society, which I guess kind of sucks. So basically he's sad that the pandemic is waning, that he's had his vaccines, that he's actually going to be forced to go back to work and leave the house again. And that's bad, because that means he has to speak to other white people. And not other white people, just speak to white people.
Have to touch them, might have to hold their hand or shake hands or something.
He might bump into one in the street.
Ugh.
I mean, look at the way he phrases this. As the pandemic wanes, I have to leave the safety of my whiteness-free castle. And I know that racism is going to come roaring back into my daily life. I hate doing imagine if it was the other way around. But just imagine if, this is a white guy writing in a white nationalist publication that was like, as the pandemic wanes, I have to leave the safety of my blackness-free castle, and I know that N-words are going to come roaring back into my daily life.
I bet there is actually an article right now on the
Probably,
Daily Stormer like that,
probably.
where it's like, no, the pandemic's over, I've got to go back to work with the darkies or something like that.
Yeah, probably.
XXX, Stormer 25 or something.
Yeah. And this guy is a verified checkmark on Twitter, and the Daily Stormer are not allowed in polite society. Personally, I'd rather if both of them were exiled from polite society, but instead it's us, who are not even on either side, who are exiled from polite society. So there we go. He says, I've said here and elsewhere, of course you have, that one of the principal benefits of the pandemic is how I've been able to exclude racism and whiteness generally from my day-to-day life. I haven't had to see any whiteys, you see.
By getting rid of all the white people, I no longer experience racism. Okay.
Over the past year, I have, of course, still had to interact with white people on Zoom or watch them on television or worry about whether they would succeed in re-electing a white supremacist president.
I have had to see them, but at least I don't have to listen to them in the same room.
But white people aren't in my face all of the time. I can more or less only deal with whiteness when I want to. Their cops aren't hunting me. They're cops. As if the cops are just the agents of white people, and no black person has ever wanted a cop around when something's been happening or something like this.
There's the white cops and the black cops.
But the white cops aren't hunting me when I drive through my neighborhood. Like it's the fucking Hunger Games or something. What are we talking about here? Like the cops, it's like Deliverance, where they're just hunting him through the woods. It's, oh, thank God that's over for the duration of the pandemic. Like, the hang-ups aren't bothering me or threatening me when I'm trying to do some shopping. And it's just translate that first paragraph.
Mate, everyone else just shopping. What are you doing?
Yeah. Well, he's living in a racial nightmare, right?
Like when he's walking around with the car, he's like, oh, God.
Yeah, exactly.
Everyone else is just like, oh, no.
The white people, exactly, right? And so translation is just, I don't like white people and rather live in a society without them. And of course there are options for that, but Ellie doesn't explore any of these because they would involve admitting that he doesn't want to live in Africa. That's because I haven't been driving or shopping in person. White people haven't improved. I've just been able to limit my exposure to them. I've turned my house into Wakanda, a technically advanced, globally isolated home base from where I can pick and choose and how often I interact with white people. Right, so you've created an ethno-state that has extremely strong border controls and keeps out certain undesirable races.
God, it sounds like some kook the FBI would find. Or he's just like starting a race war with him and his son or something.
One man's race war.
Yeah. I swear, isn't that like a Chris Morris movie or something?
Probably. Well, that's why I had to go through this. But yeah, it's white people who are the problem, and the problem isn't in your head. To be clear, it's not most or even many of my interactions with white people are bad. It's that I'm able to choose when to expose myself to interactions with potentially bad white people. Well, hang on a second. So not even most or many of his interactions with white people are bad. And it's not even, you're not even saying any, really. It's the potentially bad white people. So that's just, what's a potentially bad white person? But again, like, the problem seems to be in your own head, mate. Like, you seem to be walking around in a delusional race-based state of fear. And when asked, you can be like, no, I don't have arguments with white people or anything. They seem perfectly nice, but I just hate them. That choice is a privilege I've never really had until this past year. Going out into white society for me was a bit like being a beekeeper to go and get honey. I know what I'm doing. If I put on the right protection and blow enough smoke, most of the bees will leave me alone. And the ones who don't really cause me that much pain. But I've got to put on the suit and the hat and the mesh and carry the smoke machine and be careful every time I want some goddamn honey. This year...
Isn't this like stage 3 of the UN stages of genocide? I mean, dehumanization of white people, comparing them to insects or rodents. So,
But what I don't get is like, okay, so I mean, what's he describing here? Is he describing the kind of the facade of politeness that he has to put on? Because how do you want to act? Like, what do you want to like your interactions with people to be like? You know, if being polite is
he
like
wants to spit in the faces of white people, but he has to not do that.
Yeah.
It's like putting on a beekeeping suit. I have to keep myself to myself.
yeah, oh god, one of them said good afternoon to me as I walked past them. It was awful.
Dirty white.
Yeah, the people at this Target, white. So anyway, I get the feeling that he just has a problem with white people. And the thing is, conversely though, I also get the feeling that white people don't think about him at all. I don't think a single white person thinks about anything that this person says. It's been a revelation, but it can't last. With the vaccination comes re-entry into the larger society. I've been the default skin colour in my personal life for a year, but I think you're the default skin colour in your personal life all the time.
What does that mean, default? What, like there's different skins he can wear? Like he's playing CSGO or something?
I mean, maybe, but I think what he's talking about is like when he goes to the shop and gets a plaster, it's brown rather than white. Or the plaster is like pinkish colour. And so he's like, God, I'm no longer the default skin colour.
What?
I don't, this is the way they think. But I'll be thrust into the world again where I'm treated like an other, where white people feel empowered to just walk around like they own the place. Dude, this is clearly about you and not white people. White people are just going about their daily lives. And I'm sure that every other race of people is just going about their daily lives. And you're just like, God, they think they own the place. A weekend trip to CVS, which I believe is a pharmacy, showed me that I'm not ready. I'm not ready to go back to accepting that in a diverse and pluralistic society, some white people are allowed to just impose their implicit biases on the world, and the rest of us have to suck it up. What do you think happened to him at this pharmacy?
What happened to the CVS?
Yeah.
Like, did you walk in and you just started hearing the cashier shouting racial epithets?
Well, I'll tell you. This is a tragic story, and I want some Fs in the chat as you're hearing this. I was idling in the parking lot near the door when another car pulled up, stopped right in front of the store, and rolled down the window. An older white woman shouted towards the door, "Is this where you get the vaccines?" There was only one person standing outside of the CVS, a young black woman who looked to me to be no older than 16. The black teenager ignored the woman, but the white lady insisted. I said, "Is this where you get the vaccines?" At this point, the teenager did this elaborate pantomime of looking behind her. Very clear she must not be talking to me, a person just standing outside messing with my phone move. This apparently really pissed off the old white woman, who then yelled at the top of her voice, "Is this where you get the vaccines?" By this point, a small traffic jam had piled up behind her and cars started honking. She yelped in disgust, "The service," and drove off. So the white woman thought that the kid worked at the pharmacy and the kid didn't. And that's it. That's the racism.
How did he survive?
Well, he didn't, barely. If I'd been on my game, if I remembered my beekeeper suit, I'd have rolled down my window and spoke up on behalf of the teenager. Why didn't the teenager say, "I don't work here"? Like, I generally try to ignore bias directed at me, but I cannot abide bias directed at young people. Well, there's your first mistake. They deserve it. Pre-COVID, I'd have been ready with some witticism, which both answered the lady's question and made clear that I disapprove of her haranguing a young person. She just wants to know whether the vaccine's available there, for God's sake.
Just say, "I don't know."
Yeah, just say, "I don't know," or yes or no. Like, is it? I think it probably was where they get the vaccine as well. He says, "But I've been living in my white-free, castle-free..." God, just a white-free castle. A black man's home is his castle, Callum.
Jesus Christ. Just thinking of the Stormer articles talking about, oh man, the last pandemic has been Jew-free or something. I mean, that's literally, I bet there is one talking about
There
exactly
probably
this.
is. I never look at the Daily Stormer. Whether I was supposed to speak up and what my children would think if they saw me getting in a shouting match with an old white lady. By the time I'd figured out what to say and how to say it, the moment had passed. And then everyone clapped, I assume. And then I was left with the other side effect of racism that people don't always see. How have we got to racism here? The doddering old lady who thinks that one of the kids standing outside the store works at the store. Like, who hasn't that happened to? Like, I've been walking around shops when some old person's like, "Do you know where this is?" And I'm like, "Oh, sorry, I don't work here." It's embarrassing. It's kind of awkward. It's like, "Oh, sorry, I thought you did." It's like,
Clearly because they're a race car.
Yeah, it's clearly because they're racist. You know, who's this not happened to at some point when they're young, especially? Because young people stacking shelves a lot of the time because, you know, it's a part-time job that requires no skills. You know, like, anyway, it's about race, though. Talk about racial effect. Did I fail to show solidarity with this young black stranger? Yeah, I'm sure that's...
Sorry, what were you meant to do? like smash the window and be like, Wakanda forever or something? What are you talking?
This girl's on her phone looking at Tinder or something, and some black guy...
The black nationalist is like, Black Pride!
Yeah, just yells Wakanda forever from his car. So what? Was I part of the permissive culture that allowed this white lady to exist? I don't know. What are your options, mate?
Pull out the knife.
What? White lady exists, this guy. Did I miss a teachable moment that could have showed my children how to stand up to people? Stand up to her for what? When someone asks you where something is, you tell them to go to hell.
I'll teach you where the vaccines are.
It's been a year since somebody else's racism made me feel like I failed. What the are you talking about? What racism, right? And the next line is, a lot of white people have no idea what I'm talking about.
I think a lot of black people have no idea what you're talking about.
Yeah, it's not just the white people. Guilty as charged, though. I know because I posted this story on Twitter, and the responses from some of the white people were just so typical. Just a bunch of them of recentering of the experience of the white lady shouting questions. Why didn't the young woman just answer the lady's question? Good question. What was wrong with asking other people for help? Another great question. Like,
not in my neighborhood.
You pull your own bootstraps up around here, says the conservative writing for The Nation. I suppose if you're part of the majority culture and aren't regularly confused for an employee, the white lady's question seems innocuous. No, you can easily, even if you're white, be mistaken, especially if you're a young person, for staff working at a store. That happens to all races, you fucking bigots. Oh, anyway. Multiple white people brought up the experience of wearing a Hawaiian shirt at Trader Joe's and being mistaken for staff. Oh, look, it turns out it does happen to other white people. To just white people, sorry. As if wearing the distinctive outfit of a chain store employee is the same as wearing distinctive black skin out of any old store.
She was 16.
What are you talking about? Oh, God. Young people have jobs, right? I know that's hard to understand. Look, for those who still don't get it, the first issue is that the white woman was not asking for help. She felt entitled to it. Yeah, well, this is a boomer problem, okay? Boomers, when talking to young people, feel entitled to their help and time.
Well, it's also kind of community. Like, they expect people to help each other. Unlike your neighborhood, apparently, where
but
no one helps
I've
anyone.
built Castle Wakanda, where no white people are allowed in.
But I mean,
why would I think about your, communal standards?
But even if you just go to, like, a rural area in England, for example, that's mostly older people, like, they'll talk to each other and try and help out each other with where's this or where's that. You would never get that in London.
No.
Because no one talks to each other.
No. She didn't say, excuse me, young lady, would you happen to know where I can get a vaccine? That's just etiquette 101. That's how I would ask an actual employee in uniform and everything. It's like, okay, but that seems like whiteness. That seems like you're describing what could be described by other black activists as whiteness. Politeness and courtesy. I mean, I'm sure I could find a dozen articles that say exactly that. The second issue is that the assumption by white people that black people were put on this earth to serve them is a very real and annoying thing that happens in society. That's right. That's right. The white lady was rolled up and she's like, there's a slave. Like,
that's what happened there.
Yeah, exactly.
That's right. You think us slaves? Like, no. Just thought the young girl worked at the shop.
just wanted to get my vaccine. Every black person I know has some story when a white person assumed there were staff at a business they were shopping at. Yeah, and no white person has a similar story. It's an unconscious bias, and if I'm being generous, I'll assume that most white people don't know they're doing it most of the time. Yes, that's what an unconscious bias is. All of them don't know they're doing it if it's an unconscious bias. You absolute genius. It's these little bits of racial bias that I could really do without. It's not that I can't overcome any of it, it's that I resent having to do so. I despair of going back to a world where the slings of arrows of outrageous white people are part of my day. I mean, there are literally entire countries where there are 0 white people. There are entire countries where it's just black people. And yet, I'll shake off the rust eventually. A year from now, when I go to pick up my wife from CVS, I'll be ready for white ladies like the one in the parking lot. I'll tell her a version of what I always tell white people in the suburbs who demand directions like my name is Waze. I don't know what that means. No, sorry, the whatever you're looking for isn't here. You'll have to try the one in Harlem, 1619 Martin Luther King Boulevard, just a few blocks away from Marcus Garvey Park. Good luck. And the white person at that is like, thanks very much, and then get lost. Because they're actually not like anti-segregationists. Waze is a GPS app, is it right? Okay, thanks for letting me know. And so this got some attention on the Twitter, as you might imagine. And so Ellie posted a response to this on Twitter. There are white people who think I wrote the story about how black people aren't here to only serve white people as a service to white people. And thus I'm inviting white criticism of my own damn experiences, which just takes like some effing nerve, man. Dude, what is wrong with you? Like, I mean, you really just seem to hate white people. You just, like, it's your profession at this point, isn't it? If you read and learned a little something, I'm happy for you. And if you read it and learned nothing, I'm sorry for you. But it's not really about you. Not every goddamn thing is about you. No, that's right. Everything's about you, isn't it, Ellie? That's what this is. This is nothing to do with the woman who was just trying to get her vaccine. This is about you and your paranoia about white people and your castle Wakanda that they're threatening to invade. And that's Joe Biden's America, by the way. I turned it into a post because a lot of non-white people are feeling what I'm feeling, and I have the unique opportunity and responsibility to give voice to that. I'm the hero of black people. Anyway, I've written...
Your cape's in the mail.
Yeah. I believe they want to put up a statue of you. Anyway, I've written 2 stories since then about law stuff, because, as most people know, my social media is actually a guerrilla marketing campaign to get people to accept substantive due process. Okay. In the meantime, I'm starting Dad O'Clock. And he retweeted a few other people, and one of them is a Twitter user we featured before, who goes by the name of Angry Black Lady.
Okay.
Do you not remember her?
No.
Well, we have featured tweets by Angry Black Lady before. This is an excellent thread talking about this piece. Anyone who felt the same kind of way about Ellie's article in The Nation yesterday about having dreading to go back out into the world and deal with white people again needs to read this thread. So presumably it was forwarded to Hamza Yusuf. I saw a lot of people in Ellie's mentions being complete asshats. Well, if you fall to pieces every time you go out in public, maybe you should just stay home, Snowflake. It's not about falling to pieces. It's the exact opposite. It's about stealing oneself. Armor. Imagine having to steel yourself every time you walk out of the house just because you don't know who the good white people are. God, why do you live in a country with white people in it? Like, why do it? I wouldn't do this.
So don't give them ideas.
But honestly, if I was a massive racist and I hated, I don't know, Chinese people, and I was like in China writing articles about how my castle Wakanda was free of Chinese people, and every time, oh no, now I have to go outside and meet a Chinese person, I think it would be totally reasonable to say, why don't you just move to another country where there aren't Chinese people, where you don't have to deal with them? Like, why is that not an acceptable response to that? If you enjoyed this segment from the podcast of the Lotus Eaters, you can watch the full broadcast live every weekday at 1 p.m. UK time on lotuseaters.com.